It's no secret that there's a lot going on in the React world. From server components to Next to everything in the remix land to people building their own new solutions and frameworks, there's just so much going on. And it's more important than ever that we take the time to reflect on that and see how, as a whole React developer community, we feel. That's why I think it's important we go through the State of React survey together. There's a new survey that just came out from my favorite team of web dev surveyists, Sacha and crew. They're killing it with this one. They DM'd it to me, and I wanted to share it with y'all too, so that we can all give the feedback necessary for the whole community to better understand what isn't working, and we can move forward together with a unified vision for how to improve web development. And obviously, the link's in the description, so click that if you haven't already. State of React 2023. As soon as React was first introduced, it was clear it would become a big deal for the web. People did not think that initially, but sure, they even acknowledge that here. Despite the weird JSX thing, developers quickly adopted it. What's even more impressive, the community stuck on through major changes such as function components and hooks. But now it's 10 years later, and the newly introduced React server components promise to be the biggest change since React itself. Will the community follow along one more time, or will developers jump ship to Svelte, Solid, or something else? Let's find out together with the first ever State of React survey. Seems like, first and foremost, we're going to be checking off the APIs we've used. I have used it. Sure, I want to use it again. Ooh, create portal. I am the lunatic who uses that a lot. Forward ref. Painful, but it's useful. Should I be explaining what these are when I go through? Context is React's built-in state manager to go through components. So when you mount a context, everything below it has access to whatever that context exposes. So it's useful for, hey, I want everything in this tree to have access to this data. Usually, React apps have a ton of these contexts mounted at the top of the app to be treated like globals, which isn't the best pattern, but is a powerful way to manage state and access data across your application. Somebody in chat just pointed out that it's not really a state manager. It isn't. You have to manage the state yourself, but it gives you access to that data in the functions you expose throughout the app. Create portal. I have a bunch of random content about this. Most recently, I did a video about the stuff I was proud of building at Twitch with ModView, where we used portals heavily. It's a really cool pattern for taking something in the virtual DOM and rendering it somewhere else in the real DOM. Forward ref is utter chaos. It lets you take a reference to an element and pass it through multiple layers of React so that you can have a top level thing that has references on it so you can access the DOM nodes, and then that gets forwarded through to like an input field really deep in. Fragment. We usually see this syntax for it. It's mostly there so that you can follow the components return one component rule. So if you have a component that has two children but doesn't really have a parent, you can wrap that in a fragment and not have to worry about the hierarchy as much. Lazy. I use lazy all the time. Lets you defer loading components until it's rendered for the first time. So this lets you not even load in the JavaScript until you're actually rendering the component. Also a way to guarantee that things run on client, not on the server. Really powerful. Memo lets you skip re-rendering a component when its props are unchanged. It's cool. I would use it again. Not the best thing, but it does its job. Profiler lets you measure rendering performance of a React tree programmatically. I've heard of it and I'm interested. I usually just use the React Dev Tools, but I should try out Profiler. It does sound really cool. Strict mode is great, minus it re-rendering things constantly. If you've ever seen your effects running twice, that's because strict mode is doing that. And usually people don't mount the strict mode component. They turn it on in a config somewhere, but yeah, strict mode is cool. What pain points have I encountered related to the APIs mentioned above? Forward ref is super unintuitive. Context as a global state provider is full of foot guns and often causes full app re-renders for no good reason. Cool. Let's move on to hooks. Use callback. Use callback is great. So if you're defining a function inline in React and you pass that function as a reference to something like a use effect, but you defined it in line, that function's definition is going to change on every rerun, so React can't properly diff it. Use callback guarantees that that function instantiation will be exactly the same on multiple re-renders unless the dependencies of that function change. So it's mostly a way to stabilize your function's definition across re-renders. Use context. Obviously, if you're using a context, you're probably using use context to access the values within it. Use deferred value. I have used this once. I don't want to say my experience was positive or negative. Effectively, this lets you render an old UI state or not update the UI until a value has changed. It can be handy. I want an example of this to better explain it. During updates, React will first attempt to re-render with the old value and then try another re-render in the background with the new value. It's integrated with suspense. If the background update caused by a new value suspends the UI, the user will not see the fallback. Interesting. So this is like a way to keep showing old values when you have loading states and things going on. It's actually really useful. That makes sense. Combining this with something like React Query and showing stale values with manual, clearer behaviors is cool, but also probably unintuitive to debug. I'm going to say I've used it because I did use it once. Not positive or negative. I'll leave the experience neutral. Use effects. Again, I'm going to leave it neutral. Y'all know what use effect is. I don't want to go on that rant right now. Use ID. Use ID is a strange one, but it's useful for basically telling React like this value, this component is the same, even if we don't have a manually defined key that we're passing in. This is much more useful with server components and client components and weird interactions between them. But it's generally useful to let the DOM know, hey, this thing hasn't changed. Don't trigger like a screen reader to reread it because it's still the same value. Use memo as a React hook that lets you cache the results of a calculation between renders. Mostly useful for making sure an object is stable, but useful for a lot of other things too. Use reducer. Fun fact, almost all of the hooks within React that are even vaguely state management are built on top of use reducer. Even use state is just a use reducer wrapper internally. It's almost like Redux built into React, but very, very minimal. It's cool. It's fine. I'm not going to say positive or negative. It is what it is. I would say use ref is good, but the problems I'm having when I need to pull use ref out are terrible. So my experience might be negative, but that's because of the weird problems where I need a specific reference to something, not because the API itself is bad. So use ref, cool. The .current stuff's weird. It's fine though. Use state is great. Use state has made explaining React so much easier. So much easier. Use sync external store. Oh, use sync external store. I love it. I've only had to use it once or twice myself, but this is the hook that libraries like Zustand and React Query use in order to take something that exists outside of React and build a relationship between that and React itself to synchronize that external store's state with React internally. Really powerful. It's a great way to like subscribe and create patterns with an external store and an internal store with React. If you wanted to go build your own crazy state management solution, sync external store is probably going to be the base piece for that. What pain points have I encountered with hooks? Use effects, foot guns. Use effect problems that occur sporadically well after code is written. Unstable values, i.e. inlined functions or objects. Triggering, use effect, use callback, use memo, etc. Cool. React Cache. Cache lets you return the result of a data fetch or computation. I have used it. I'm excited for this to get more stable. It's not super stable at the moment. And the difference between React's cache and Next's cache isn't well defined enough. Server components, I fucking love. Components that run exclusively on the server. That's a really good, concise definition. Server actions. React's built-in solution for server mutations. Also like it a lot and excited to use it more. Start transition lets you update the state without blocking the UI. I'll say this is my first negative experience that I'm going to click that button for because it is weird debugging the patterns of like when the transition starts and ends. Yeah, it's a really powerful thing for specific like types of UIs that are taking advantage of all these new patterns, but it feels like a bit of an abstraction leak where I would almost expect a library to handle these types of things for me. But since we're still in the early primitive days of the new tools, you have to manage your own transitions. Suspense. Suspense is a great way to introduce loading state higher up in your DOM so that children of it can manage their loading, async, whatever they have to do, and just have one shared loading state for all of that. Really powerful if you're rendering components lazily or you're using the new asynchronous patterns with React Server components, where you can use suspense to have a component that does some heavy data fetch, and suspense will let you stream in that response when it's done. Honestly, suspense was not like super useful when lazy was the main way you accessed it and used it, but now with all these awesome new patterns with server components, suspense is finally a thing I'm using all the time, and it's really good. So yes. Taint. You know that we love the taint here. I don't need to go too much further. I'm going to be one of the few people that's actually used it because I went and played with it as soon as it was announced. But yeah, good old taint. Use, I've had a negative experience with. Use is meant to be kind of like React Query where you pass it a promise and it gives you the result and it lets you suspend until then. So if you pass a promise or a fetch call here, it will call the suspense above it. But it has a lot of weird things that cause it to rerun constantly, and I've yet to make a use call that involves fetch that works properly on the server and the client. It's just not in a great state. I hope it gets better. Use form state. I've used it. I'm sure it's good in a lot of places, but I'm clicking negative here. There's nowhere near a deterministic enough relationship between use form state and the form itself. Because if you have multiple forms, this can get messy. And you also have to leave server components in order to use the hook. So this becomes a client component too. It's the lack of strong tie between the form itself, the server component, and the form state that makes it harder for me to really align. Same deal with use form status, where this is going to be the form that this client component is mounted in, I think, but it's not deterministic enough for me. I'm real picky about that personally. So I'm going to say used it. I'm not going to mark for that one, but use form state's freaking weird. So I'm marking that one as negative. Use transition, leaning neutral on this one. It's another one of those things which we mentioned before. It feels weird that I have to deal with this in the UI myself, but I get why. It's just another one of those leaky things where I'm excited for libraries to make these things easier going forward. What pain points have I encountered related to the new APIs? Too primitive. I feel like we need better libs to abstract the value. Item 2, how do I want to word this? Lack of deterministic relationships with forms and use form state, use form status. Wrapping my head around start transition and use transition has been a bit rough. Cool. Now for component libraries. Ant design, heard of it, not interested. Chakra design, I only played with it a little bit, but it's not for me. Headless UI, used it was fine. MUI, used it, not my thing anymore. Radix, fucking dope. React Bootstrap, never actually used it, never will care to. Shad UI, absolutely. React Aria, I've only used it a little bit and it was really good. I want to play with it more. It's like React Aria, Headless UI, and Radix are all trying to solve both the accessibility issues and the general behavior issues around complex inputs and other interactive components. None of the three provide actual UIs or components. They all provide the pieces you need to build those yourself. Really cool tools. I'm happy we're having real competition in that space and that we're talking about these things more now. I feel like I was crazy being the only one who knew what Radix or React Aria was like 3 or 4 years ago. And now unstyled input libraries is like a trend, which is really dope because all the people working on these things are working really hard and it's super important tech. What other component libraries have I used? Tailwind UI. I've used Framer. It was good. I've used React Spring. It was really good. Not used React Motion. I love Auto Animate. I have a whole video about it. React Native Reanimate is fucking dope too. All of these are great. I know React Motion is good. I haven't played with it yet, but Framer and React Spring are fucking incredible. Auto Animate, if it solves your problem, is so nice. And React Native Reanimated is groundbreaking. I've used D3, used React Viz, I've used Recharts, I used Victory, and I tried VizX. I did not like VizX. D3 is way too primitive. I don't remember using React Viz. I liked Recharts, and Victory was weird. React Hook Form is the best option still. Which libraries or frameworks have I used? CSS modules, no strong stance. Emotion, no more. Sass is fine. I never actually used Stitches, fun fact. Style components, best we could do at the time. Tailwind, I fucking love. Uno, pretty good. Vanilla Extract, I played with. I didn't use it enough. I really like the philosophy around it. I think it's important. And StyleX, I will throw in here as well. CSS in JS on the server is a bit rough. Jodi, I fucking love Jodi. And we're going deep into state management now. Cool, MobX I've used. I had a terrible experience with MobX because it caused a lot of weird memory leaks for us at Twitch way back. So this was 2018. I'm sure it has gotten way better since. But man, I dealt with a lot of weird shit with MobX and like cleaning things up back in the decorator days. So I have trauma associated with MobX. Recoil also had fun memory leak issues when I tried it, and honestly, Jodi is better Recoil for me. Recoil was by Vuex, the creator of Prettier as well as Excalidraw. Really smart developer. Recoil was trying to do internal atomic state. Super cool, but yeah, just Jodi's in a better place, and anything the Point Managers team is doing is fucking dope. Redux, I am very done with. You guys can guess why. Redux Toolkit is much better overall, and if you're stuck in Redux, you should be moving to Redux Toolkit to the best of your ability. Use state's great. X state's fine. And Zestand, my love. Zestand has made my life so much easier that I've even considered pronouncing it correctly. I won't, but I've considered it. React Query. Come on, why did they not include React Query? Stable values, deterministic behavior, async workloads outside of React, high throughput state think updates every frame. Yeah, I've run into pretty much everything you can have problems with. So use effect running twice. I desperately want use memo with cleanup. Yeah. Oh, cool. Tanslite query is an option in here. Nice. Apollo client. Never again. I have lost years of my life. The Apollo team works hard and made GraphQL a standard. I appreciate them immensely for it. Apollo client is one of the biggest piles of tech debt I've ever encountered in my career. I did my first ever podcast, like my first ever piece of dev content, because I chatted with them and got them to do a podcast with me, like the Apollo team. The condition was they would bring Ben Newman, who was like the lead eng on things at the time, on the podcast as well. So me and my friends at Twitch could bully him into introducing cache invalidation. Because at the time, there was no way to delete from the cache. When you had a long-lived session, like a Twitch session where people are on Twitch for hours and you're using GraphQL for data, there's a lot of data in there you don't need anymore. And I was seeing like half gig plus Apollo GraphQL caches, and I couldn't clear them because there was no way to do it until V3. absurdity. And don't get me started on the weird deep cloning bullshit that it used to do. I think they fixed a lot of that, but it was real bad, like real bad. Relay is much better, but you need a PhD to set it up correctly. I often joke about how like if you don't hold 2 PhDs or work at Meta, I don't believe you can get Relay working. There was an exception to that rule, which was Jane Wong, but she now works at Meta. So there's no longer an exception to the rule. Nobody actually gets Relay working. RTK query, I'm really happy RTK query exists. I will never use it because it is not for me. But if you're deep on Redux and you need some better async management shit, RTK query is best way to do it. SWR, I'm known for talking a little crap on. It's way too minimal for my taste, but it's also pretty nice. And a quick way for remote data fetching is cool. I just wish it did more and that the fetching logic wasn't as abstracted as it is. And I wish they didn't redefine the word mutation the way they did. I'm going to even leave a comment here. The confusion around how they used the word mutation is enough of a reason for me to hate SWR forever. And this is a bias of I'm a teacher and they took the word mutation and they misused it. I have the same issue with React Router where they took the term query params, which used to mean the things after the question mark, search params, and they used it to describe URL params, which are the things, or well, I would say path parameters, which are the things in the route. So I hate when React devs take these terms that mean things and use them for something entirely different. I kind of have the same issue with use client and use server, but let's continue. And obviously, huge TanStack query fans here. What's TRPC? I've never heard of that before. Proud that we got that in here. What other libraries have you used for data loading? Next. Look at what made it in here. Next type safe URL. Good shit. TRPC is like gRPC, but for Theo. Good pun. I just wanted to say next, but if that's not an option, what else have I used to load data? Use a lot of weird things to load data. I think I'm just going to skip this one because I can't think of anything that makes enough sense to put there. What pain points have I encountered related to data loading? I have had so much pain in data loading, but the things that immediately come to mind is stale data and caching, both sides of it, where data's old or data isn't cached, it takes too long. Shared normalized caches, so think something like a GraphQL cache where I have a user query and user can have 15 plus fields in it. In one place I queried 2 of them, another place I queried 3 other things. Normalizing the cache so that's one cached entity sucks. And GraphQL can do this well, but yeah, it's painful. And then Apollo's cache in general sucks, especially for long-lived apps. I've had so much pain from Apollo that I would prefer to just never touch it again or recommend it. Yeah, it is what it is. Meta frameworks. Woo, Astro. We love Astro here. Create React app. Help kickstart my channel. Gatsby is effectively dead. Next.js is pretty cool. Remix is Remix. I'm really happy it exists. It pushed the standards forward. Redwood, I haven't actually used, and it's entirely based around GraphQL. I'd say Redwood is like the first Create T3 app type thing, where it was a full stack. Here's how you build your server and your client, and you have them relate to each other. But they went way too hard on GraphQL, which I don't think is the solution for getting started almost ever. You should never start with GraphQL. You should move to GraphQL when you have problems that GraphQL solves. So yeah, not a big Redwood fan. Other meta frameworks? Not really. Other backend tools. TS up saves my life all the time. ES build's fucking incredible. Rollup is really useful tooling. TSC, CLI exists. Parcel exists. TurboPack, I really hope it gets stable. Good old Snowpack joke, quick. I've hosted React on AWS. Annoying. Never hosted on Azure. Hosted on Cloudflare. Neutral, DigitalOcean, negative, Fly.io. God, I hated deploying on Fly, especially when they didn't have an ARM binary and I had to run everything through Rosetta. It was so slow and painful. GitHub Pages, mediocre. Heroku, I'm happy it's dead. Netlify is fine. I'll give them their credit. I never actually successfully deployed on Render, so I can't even check that one. And obviously, we like Vercel. Not a fan of Firebase, fan of PlanetScale. Prisma, I'll leave neutral. Y'all know how I feel now. Redis is great. Sentry is neutral. Supabase, I'll say I'm positive about. Upstash, fucking love Upstash. Worker, KV, Upload, Thing, Axiom, Clerk. These are all like data stuff, which is weird. They didn't have... Clerk should absolutely have been in that list. Graph I didn't really use with React. PostHog I use with React. Drizzle. Yeah, they put Prisma in here for some reason. It isn't really a service. Which languages are your backend apps written in? I fucking love Elixir. Go is fine. I'm going to say negative experience with JavaScript and positive with TypeScript because it's pretty fair. I haven't used PHP in a while, but I have used PHP. I haven't used Python in a while or Ruby for the same reasons. I'm putting negative on PHP. Back-end engineers not respecting front-end engineers. Barriers between front-end and back-end being arbitrarily defined. Scaling infrastructure in non-serverless environments. Infra providers slowly catching up to the needs of RSCs. Cool. Do I do it? Let's be honest. Which libraries have you used to render? Obviously, yep. Ink was weird. It's fine. Yep. Not a big React Native for Web fan. It's fine. React PDF, it works. I fucking love React 3 Fiber, and I want to use Remotion more before I take an opinion on it. Let's go through what all these are quick because they don't specify. I have another video where I talk about using React for things that aren't websites. React DOM is using it for websites. React Email is using it for email. Ink is using it for CLIs. React Native is React Native. Y'all know what that is. React Native for web is using the React Native APIs to render on the web, which is interesting, but it means you can have one code base for multiple platforms. React PDF lets you use primitives to render a PDF with React, really powerful for generating PDFs on your server. React 3 Fiber lets you do Canvas 3D stuff with 3JS with React. It's a really powerful way to make like games and interactive 3D environments. Super cool shit. Pointmanders made it. They're dope. And Remotion is a video editor in React, which is really cool where you can write React components for video elements. Which libraries have you used for validating data against the schema? I've used all of them. Zod is dope. Rest I'm iffy on. Typebox is really promising. That's the one by the Arc guy, right? So I played with that a bunch and it was really powerful and really fast. Oh, look at that. What services do we use for auth? Oh yeah, Valibot. Ionic I'm neutral on. React Native I love. Yeah, Expo and RN are both incredible. What other front-end frameworks have I used? Angular, negative. Ember, very negative. I hated every moment in Ember. I might have not, if we didn't move off Ember at Twitch, I might have never become a front-end dev. I hated Ember so much. Lit, I'm neutral on. Preact, I fucking love. Preact was a huge part of how I started to understand web standards better when I used Preact in vanilla HTML and JS projects and like learned what all the compiler steps were to make React behave like React. Quick I've used, not for me. I'm happy it exists. Solid I fucking love. Svelte I'm more and more liking. I don't love the single file components, and I also really don't like their markup syntax, but its primitives and its core philosophy are great. And now with runes, it's getting more and more scalable. And Vue is Vue. I'm very excited for Vapor, I believe, is the Vue compiler coming out soon, which is hype. What do you use React for? Literally all of these. I'm mostly using Canary at this point. Professionally, industry sector, education, entertainment. It's weird how that's like selecting a random place depending on where I've scrolled to. Seems like it's an accessibility issue. News, media, blogging, social media, telecoms. Quite a few things. Edge rendering, ISG, islands, MVA. God, I've used almost all of these. I haven't actually done progressive hydration or resumability. SSR, SPAs, SSGs, streaming SSR. Yeah, it would be a whole video if I try to explain all of these. So yeah, let me know in the comments if I should do that video because I'm not doing it right now. How happy are you with the current state of React? I'm very happy. I'm not expecting that to be the answer for most. I'm so excited to see the results of this survey though. I'm very excited for Cache. Very excited for Forget. Suspense isn't recent. I'm happy it's usable now. And server actions, I'm not super in love with yet. I do love the new React docs, and it feels bad not checking that. React Forget is the new React compiler. Kind of think of like what Vapor and Vue are doing, where it's going to read your React code and insert all the memoization and shit where it needs to be, so you don't have to write any of that anymore. The original lead dev who announced it no longer works at Meta, but some other really talented people have picked it up since, and it's making progress. I would expect to hear more about that in the near future. I think my biggest concern and pain point around React right now is that the size of React's community has gotten to the point where most React devs didn't choose to use React. And that means the amount of buy-in the average React dev has is much lower. They're just using this thing so they feel like they have to. And when things change, they feel like their job's getting harder for no reason. Compared to a framework like Svelte, where the average Svelte developer chose to use Svelte, they're going to like it more. They're going to be reading all these updates and seeing all these new things more. React is so popular that we're not going to have that type of satisfaction inherent to the average user. And even a survey like this is going to index on the more excited React users because those are the people who are going to see the link and do the survey. That's the biggest concern I have, is that React's advancements are going to get a lot of pushback due to the nature of React developers not being React fans anymore, just because it is so popular now. And I don't know if that can be solved. I don't know how that should affect the team's approach. I just know it's a real thing and it's scary. Resources. What have I used to learn React? Free courses, on-the-job training, docs, videos, self-directed learning, all checks out. What blogs, magazines, or newsletters do you use to keep up with React? Honestly, just This Week in React. Those threads are really good. What sites or courses have I used to learn React? Have I really used none of these? I played with Egghead a bit when I was at Twitch, but not much. I don't listen to any of these. They made this an open question, which is probably the right call. Lee Rob, that one weird dude with the mustache. The one weird dude with the mustache, that can be Prime. Perfect. Prime's talked about React a couple times. This is a good question. There's so many people that like no one is jumping out immediately. TK is a really good one, actually. TK Dodo is huge. Nexel deserves a highlight. Honestly, I should put Josh in here. I almost put him first. Tanner's worth a shout out for sure. Oh, Sam Sykoff. We don't always agree. In fact, we disagree a lot, but I'm slowly winning him over. Kent Dodds. Oh, Josh Cameo is huge. Oh, I've done all of these. Maybe not all of them. Oh no, don't dox me. Yeah, I started when I was 15. So yeah, I'm 11 to 20. That's weird. So I work at 2 companies and we're like 6 total, but just dev stuff, 2 to 5. Colorblind and ADHD as fuck. We did it. I think I passed. I think that's a good score. Does that mean we're done? That was a dope survey, and I'm actually really excited for the results. So make sure you stick around and you keep an eye for my streams, which are every Wednesday at around 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, because we'll be certain to go over these results as soon as they're out and available. In order for us to move together as a unified community, these resources are so important. And a huge shout out to Sasha and the team working on these surveys, because without them, we'd kind of be running blind. Appreciate y'all a ton. Thank you so much. If you want to hear all about my opinions from the last survey we did, I'll pin that in the corner. If you've already seen that or you're just looking for something different, YouTube thinks you'll like the video below it. Thank you as always. Appreciate y'all a ton. Peace, nerds.